Hello! Today is another disassembly video when I with my crew disassembled engine bought from our local page like Craigslist. In this video I will try to do narration about things that should be done to disassemble an engine. We'll see how it goes and let's get into it. So as we see, the first thing we should do is to unscrew all bolts from our oil pan. There are 20 or so of these and it is for 10mm socket. As we see, we also removing an equipment of the engine like oil injectors and so on. The next thing we should do is to, as we see, cut the silicone that is holding our oil pan. We did it with a knife, but I think any edge will do it. There are special service tools to do this. Maybe I will weld one in the future. As we see, we now need just to take off our oil pan, and as you see, there is some debris inside of oil pan. This is ice and oil. The next thing that we should do is to unscrew front and rear bolts in the engine. As you see, we couldn't unscrew our bolt, so we just used heat to loosen it up. And after this it went super easy with right pry bar or some other extension. When it was loosened, we just took it by hand by glove, but be careful, it is super hot because we heated it. As you see, the next thing it will be to remove other things from eccentric shaft like pulley and spring inside of shaft, also thermal pallet. The next thing is to unbolt front cover, and after unbolting it should just came off. Now we can take off equipment that is stacked on front of the shaft, like we see Hellcat gear. We using 10mm wrench to unbolt oil pump from its base. We don't need to take the nut from our oil pump because we can then lose more parts and it is not necessary. But if you would like it, I mean, why not? After you remove all the bolts, you can now just take off your oil pump with oil gear and chain. And don't forget that oil pump is usually getting apart because the oil is holding up to this gear. And the next thing to take off is to take counterweight. And as you saw, I just took needle bearing. You can take front metal gasket, but it is not really necessary. The next thing you should do is to unscrew the main gear in crisscross pattern, as you see. After you remove all the bolts from the main gear, you are left with some plate and spacer and needle bearing that is underneath the first plate, and at the end is the second plate. It's from the shaft. You should took all of these things off, and now you don't need to take off all the gear. But if you will left the main gear in place, you should screw one bolt to the element. Not torque, not with much force, just by hand. The better way to take off a plate from the gear, the bottom, it would be to turn the engine upside down and move the shaft. It would be much easier. As you see, we have also the pressure plate from the clutch that is held by 6 bolts. And because of the rust, we had to pry off our pressure plate from our flywheel. As you see, with flathead screwdrivers and some of hammering, tapping actually. The next challenge it will be to unbolt big nut that is holding our flywheel. As you see, we tried to unbolt this and we just decide to use heat once again, but with longer pry bar it shouldn't be much problem. Now you need to take off flywheel. It is held on the shaft by friction, and you can, as you see, tap it from the side, or the best way it would be to get your hands on special service tool or make your own from flat piece of metal that you will drill 3 holes, then take 2 bolts that will screw into the flywheel and also 1 bolt with a nut that will be pressuring on the shaft. When you will do that, the whole flywheel will just come off. Now there is a big moment when we are loosening all 18 of engine bolts. You should loosen them in crisscross pattern, or better in pattern from service manual. That way your parts shouldn't warp from pointing pressure. After taking off all the 18 bolts from the engine, you can tap here and there on the rear plate just to take her off. You don't need to take rear stationary gear, but remember to take wood draft key from the shaft. If you're considering that you will put the engine back together with same seals, keep track of where the side seal were placed. As you see in this engine, we found out an ice that was keeping engine from rotation. We didn't use force, so we didn't break anything, but that could be catastrophic if you bought an engine that was sitting and it had something like this in it. You can take your dowel pins as we did, as you see, with just a bolt, but you don't need to. Now that you took rear plate off, you can decide or take off rotor. That it will be easier, and I recommend this because then you can manage apex seals, or you can take off the housing. It's your choice. As you see, we decided to take our housing first, so we needed people to manage apex seals. As we can see, there is a lot of rust on our housing, but housing have chrome insert inside of them, and chrome is oxidizing in green, so we must clean the housing before we make any judgment. Next thing that we did was to take off dowel pins and take center plate off, but if your eccentric shaft is moving quite nicely, you can just take your middle plate without taking off dowel pins this time. As you can see, little tapping always helps, and you must maneuver anyway with your eccentric shaft and your middle plates. And our eccentric shaft is out just like this. Now we just took housing off. the rotor is last, and here we have disassembled engine. Here we have it, another disassembly video. There is not a lot of content from checking parts from that engine, so I will not edit and post another video of this just because I can. But if you like this video, maybe consider giving it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. I would like to hear your opinion. If you have any advice how to improve my channel or my videos, consider commenting below. If you like content like this, maybe consider subscribing. And yeah, some time ago my friend told me that my video, that greeting at the end of my videos is some kind of unnatural and plastic-like something. But I think little kindness in life is in place always. So, as usual, have a nice day.